There are days when getting out of bed feels like lifting a mountain. You stare at the ceiling, not because you're lazy or weak, but because your mind has already run 1,000 exhausting miles before your feet even hit the floor. The world outside your window moves, cars speed past, people laugh on sidewalks, life continues, but inside you, everything feels paused. Like you're stuck in slow motion while the rest of the world fast forwards without you. There are moments in the shower when your tears mix with the water, and no one can tell the difference. You cry silently because you've mastered the art of hiding pain. You smile at work, crack jokes with friends, post pictures with filters, but deep inside, you're falling apart. Not because you want to be dramatic, not because you're seeking attention, but because your mind feels like it's slowly drowning in a pool of thoughts that won't let you breathe. You lie awake at 2:13 a.m., endlessly scrolling on your phone, not to be entertained, but because you're terrified of silence. Because silence makes the darkness louder. You scroll, hoping to feel something, anything other than this aching emptiness. And then comes the guilt. The guilt of having things others would die for. A roof over your head, food in the fridge, maybe even people who care, but still feeling empty. You beat yourself up for not being grateful enough, for not being strong enough. You ask yourself, what's wrong with me? But let me ask you something. Have you ever sat in a room full of people and felt like a ghost? Like no one sees you? Like your laugh is a mask and your presence is invisible? Have you ever wondered if the pain will ever end, or if this is just your life now? If you felt any of that, then I need you to hear me when I say this. You are not alone. And more importantly, you are not finished yet. This speech is not some miracle pill. It won't erase your pain in 10 minutes. But what it will do is remind you of something that depression fights every day to make you forget. There is still fight left in you. You're not broken. You're buried. And it's time to dig yourself out. Because your story is not over. There was a time when Jason was on top of the world. A rising star, a scholarship athlete with a full ride to a prestigious college. He had everything, dedication, talent, and a clear path ahead. The gym was his second home, the track his sanctuary. People admired his discipline, his focus, his relentless drive. And for a while, he was untouchable. But then something changed. It wasn't sudden. It wasn't a moment of clarity. It crept in, slowly, like the fog over a morning lake, unnoticed at first, until it was all-consuming. At first, Jason just felt tired, physically drained. But as the months went on, the exhaustion deepened. His heart began to race for no reason. His hands would shake before practices. His thoughts spiraled. The panic attack started small, just a tightening in his chest, a sense of dread. But soon, they became unbearable. His performance faltered. He couldn't keep up with the demands of his training. He felt out of control, helpless. And his coach, well, he didn't understand. "You're lazy, Jason. Get it together. You were doing so well. What happened to you?" The coach would yell during practice, his voice echoing across the empty field. But what the coach didn't know was that Jason wasn't lazy. He was terrified. He wasn't slacking off. He was drowning in his own mind. The pressure was too much. His body was giving up on him, and so was his spirit. Jason withdrew into himself. He started isolating from his friends, avoiding the gym, hiding from his teammates. The panic attacks intensified. Thoughts of suicide began to cloud his mind, the weight of depression pressing down on him like a heavy cloak. There were days when he couldn't even bring himself to leave his room, let alone go to practice. He wondered if he would ever feel like himself again. He wondered if he even wanted to. Then, one day, something unexpected happened. Every evening, after his practice, Jason would walk by the janitor's closet. The old man, Mr. Barlow, was always there, cleaning the gym, mopping the floors. Jason never paid much attention to him, until one day, Mr. Barlow stopped him. "Hey, kid," the janitor said softly. "You doing okay?" Jason was taken aback. "Yeah, I'm fine," he lied, unable to hide the pain in his eyes. Mr. Barlow didn't say anything else. He just nodded and returned to his work. But the next day, as Jason passed by, there was a small post-it note on the door, written in messy handwriting. "Don't quit. You're not alone." Jason stared at the note, unsure of what to make of it. It was simple, but something about it felt like a lifeline. Every day after that, the notes kept coming. Some days, they were words of encouragement. "Take it one step at a time. Your worth isn't measured by your victories. It's okay to rest." Other days, they were small reminders of kindness. "You're seen. You matter." Eventually, Jason started to look forward to those notes. They were like a warm blanket in a world that felt cold. Slowly, he began to open up to Mr. Barlow. The janitor listened quietly, offering no judgment, just understanding. In those conversations, Jason realized something important. Maybe he didn't need to win the race. Maybe he didn't need to be the fastest, the strongest, or the best. Maybe all he needed to do was keep moving. One foot in front of the other. Just keep walking. Jason decided to show up. Not for the trophy, not for the glory, but for himself. He began attending practice again, not to compete with others, but to challenge himself. He took it slow, focusing on his recovery, one step at a time. With the support of Mr. Barlow's daily notes and his newfound perspective, Jason began to heal. The panic attacks didn't disappear overnight, but they became more manageable. His confidence returned, not because he was winning, but because he was fighting through his struggles, his pain, his fear. He learned that success wasn't just about victory, it was about resilience. And as he crossed the finish line on his own terms, Jason realized that he had already won the most important race of all, the race against himself. Samantha's life had always been a series of to-do lists and obligations. There was no room for herself, no time to pause. Raising 2 kids on her own, working double shifts at a diner, and managing every little detail of her home, Samantha was both mother and father, caregiver and provider. Every day was a balancing act, juggling the needs of her children, the demands of her job, and the constant exhaustion that seemed to creep in at night, leaving her barely able to function. But no one saw the cracks. She never let anyone see them. Every morning, she forced a smile as she tucked her kids into their school clothes, as she made breakfast, as she packed lunch boxes. She would wave goodbye, kiss them on the forehead, and remind them to be good. Then, she'd slip into her own routine, facing another long, grueling day at the diner, constantly on her feet, barely finding a moment to catch her breath. But behind the facade of strength, Samantha was breaking. She would lie awake at night, staring at the ceiling, wondering how she was going to do it all over again tomorrow. The weight of it all, being everything to everyone, was suffocating. She was overwhelmed, invisible, and exhausted to the core. She hid it, though. She hid it from her kids because she didn't want them to see her pain. She didn't want them to worry about her. She didn't want to burden them with the reality that their mom was crumbling under the weight of it all. One evening, after another exhausting day, Samantha was at home, heating up leftovers in the kitchen. The quiet of the house felt heavy. Her kids were out of sight, probably in their rooms doing homework or playing. And in that moment, it all came crashing down. The tears started slow at first, just a few trickles down her face, a result of the sheer exhaustion. But then, they came in waves, unstoppable. The tears she had held back for so long, the tears she had buried deep inside, erupted in a silent sob. She sank to the floor, the kitchen around her suddenly feeling too small, too overwhelming. She had tried so hard to be strong. But in that moment, it all felt impossible. The weight of the world pressed down on her chest. She felt broken, unseen, and lost. And then, she heard footsteps behind her. Her daughter, Olivia, stood there in the doorway, watching her with wide eyes. She didn't say anything at first. She didn't ask questions. She simply walked over and knelt down beside her mother. "Mom," Olivia whispered, her voice soft yet strong. "It's okay to cry. I see you." Those words hit Samantha like a wave, washing over the years of pain and isolation. She hadn't realized how much she needed to hear that. She hadn't realized how much she needed permission to be vulnerable, to admit that she was struggling, to allow herself to feel without shame. Olivia wrapped her arms around her mother and hugged her tightly. In that embrace, Samantha felt something she hadn't in years: comfort, acceptance, understanding. It was in that moment that Samantha realized that it wasn't weakness to cry. It wasn't failure to fall apart. It was simply part of being human. For the first time in a long time, she didn't feel the need to carry everything alone. After that night, things slowly began to change. Samantha reached out for help. She finally acknowledged the depression that had been gnawing at her for years. She started therapy and allowed herself to process the emotions she had buried. It wasn't easy, but little by little, she learned that asking for help wasn't a sign of weakness. It was a sign of strength. She learned to embrace vulnerability, to acknowledge her struggles instead of hiding them. And through that journey, Samantha not only healed herself, but also showed her children the most important lesson of all: that it's okay to not be okay. That it's okay to cry, to feel, to ask for help. And when the days felt heavy again, when life threatened to knock her down, she would remember Olivia's words. "It's okay to cry. I see you." In those words, Samantha found her strength, and in her vulnerability, she found her healing. David had always been the golden child, the one with the straight A's, the one who always had a plan. He was the first in his family to go to college, a shining example of hard work paying off. His future seemed as bright as the path he was following. He had a scholarship, friends, and a promising career waiting for him after graduation. But something changed in his second year. The pressure started to build up slowly at first. What seemed like the occasional sleepless night turned into weeks of exhaustion. The classes that once excited him now felt like a weight. The grades that used to come easily now required hours of effort, and still he didn't feel satisfied. David's passion, once so clear and undeniable, seemed to vanish, leaving behind only emptiness. It wasn't just the schoolwork. It was the nagging sense that something was wrong inside, but he couldn't put his finger on it. His social life, once filled with friends and laughter, had dwindled down to forced conversations and awkward silences. He started to retreat, pulling away from his friends, avoiding his family, and spending most of his time alone in his dorm room, staring at the wall, paralyzed by an overwhelming sense of nothingness. The worst part? He couldn't tell anyone. He couldn't explain what was happening to him, not even to himself. He wasn't sad. He didn't feel grief or anger or despair. He just felt nothing. He felt numb. The panic attack started in the middle of the night. Racing thoughts, difficulty breathing, the cold sweat that clung to his body. One night, in the middle of a particularly intense panic attack, David found himself curled up on his bed, crying for the first time in months. He couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't move. His entire body was frozen in fear, and yet he couldn't even understand what he was afraid of. By the time David made it to his third year of college, the facade had completely cracked. He was living a life that looked good from the outside. He still had the grades, the scholarship, the future, but on the inside, he was slowly withering away. He had stopped attending classes regularly. He felt like he couldn't go on anymore, but he didn't know how to stop. One night, after another meltdown, David went for a walk, unable to shake the sense of dread hanging over him. He walked aimlessly through the campus, his footsteps echoing in the empty night. The world around him seemed so distant, so foreign. As he walked, he found himself standing outside a small, dimly lit building. It was the campus counseling center. On a whim, David walked inside, hoping to find some relief, some way to explain the weight that had been pulling him down. He sat in front of a counselor, a kind woman named Susan, who listened to him without judgment. "David," she said gently, "what you're going through is real. You're not crazy. You're not alone. You're battling something that many people experience but don't talk about: depression, anxiety, a loss of purpose." For the first time in months, David felt a spark of hope. Hearing someone acknowledge what he had been feeling made him realize that maybe he wasn't broken. Maybe he was just lost, and that was okay. With Susan's support, David began therapy. Slowly, he started to unravel the tangled web of emotions he had pushed down for so long. It wasn't easy. There were days when he wanted to give up, when the weight of everything felt too much. But David learned something important. Healing wasn't about being fixed. It was about allowing yourself to feel, to admit that something wasn't right, and to take small steps toward change. By the time he graduated, David still didn't have everything figured out. He wasn't magically cured, but he had learned to accept that life wasn't about having all the answers. It was about the journey, the willingness to keep going, even when everything inside you tells you to stop. David went on to pursue a career in counseling, hoping to help others who felt as lost as he once had. He had found a new purpose, not in perfection, but in the process of healing, of helping others find their way back from the edge. And though his struggles didn't disappear, David had learned the most important lesson of all. Sometimes, it's not about finding a solution right away. It's about simply taking the next step, no matter how small. Ms. Davis had always loved teaching. The classroom was her sanctuary, a place where she felt she could make a difference in the world. She had been a teacher for nearly a decade, and her passion for her students, her subjects, and her role had never wavered. She was the teacher who stayed after class to help struggling students, the one who planned engaging lessons, and the one whose infectious smile greeted each child with warmth and encouragement. But that was before everything started to fall apart. It began with the exhaustion. She started feeling drained long before the school day even started. By the time the bell rang at the end of the day, she felt as though she had just run a marathon. Her eyes were heavy, her body ached, and the idea of going home to face her responsibilities as a mother and wife felt like too much. Still, she pushed through. She didn't have the luxury of being tired. She had a classroom full of children depending on her. So she kept going. She would smile when she walked into her classroom, even though inside she was slowly crumbling. She would laugh at the jokes her students told, even though the sound of their laughter felt like it was echoing through an empty hall. She would offer words of encouragement to her students, but she had none left for herself. Ms. Davis thought she could handle it. After all, she had always been strong. But one evening, after a particularly rough day, she found herself sitting in her car in the school parking lot, hands gripping the steering wheel, tears falling down her face. The weight of everything was suffocating. The pressure from work, the stress of family life, the feeling of never being enough in any area of her life, it all came crashing down. She felt like a failure, unable to live up to the expectations she had set for herself. The hardest part was that no one knew. She had perfected the mask. She smiled when she needed to, laughed when she had to, and made sure everyone around her thought everything was okay. But inside, she felt like she was disappearing. It was a conversation with a colleague, one she almost didn't have, that began to change everything. Her friend, another teacher, had noticed the way Ms. Davis seemed to retreat into herself more and more. One day, during a break, she asked, "Are you okay? You don't seem like yourself lately." For a moment, Ms. Davis considered brushing it off. But something in her broke, and she found herself spilling everything: the overwhelming exhaustion, the loneliness, the constant pressure to be perfect, the feeling that no one understood how hard it was to keep pretending. Her colleague listened without judgment, and then said something that would stick with Ms. Davis forever. "It's okay to not be okay. You don't have to carry the weight of the world by yourself." In that moment, Ms. Davis realized something crucial. She had been trying to do everything alone. She had been carrying her pain in silence, thinking that asking for help was a sign of weakness. But it wasn't weakness, it was strength. Strength to admit that she couldn't do it all on her own, strength to let others in, and strength to acknowledge that her mental health mattered too. Ms. Davis started seeing a counselor, and while it wasn't an immediate fix, it was the first step toward healing. She learned how to set boundaries, to ask for help when she needed it, and to be kind to herself, something she had never truly done before. The transformation didn't happen overnight. There were days when the weight of everything still felt heavy, but slowly, Ms. Davis found a way to balance her love for teaching with the care she needed to take for herself. She learned that in order to be the best teacher, she had to take care of her own mental and emotional health first. Ms. Davis is still a teacher. She still loves her students, still gives her all in the classroom. But now, when the weight feels too much, she's not afraid to ask for help. She no longer hides behind a smile. She lets herself be human. And she's teaching her students that it's okay to do the same. Maya had always dreamed of becoming a teacher. She loved the idea of shaping young minds, of helping her students grow and discover their potential. It was her calling, her passion. She poured her heart into every lesson, and the smile of a student who finally understood a difficult concept was all the reward she needed. But then, life began to take its toll. Maya had always been a hard worker, always willing to go the extra mile for her students. But there were days when getting out of bed felt impossible. Depression had crept into her life like a quiet storm, and soon it was taking over. The once joyful teacher was now struggling to keep up with the demands of her job, her personal life, and most importantly, her own mental health. She found herself drained by the simplest tasks. Her energy was gone, her passion seemed to have disappeared, and every morning felt like a battle. She forced herself to smile in front of her students, pretending that everything was okay, but inside, she was falling apart. There were moments when she would sit at her desk, staring at the clock, counting down the minutes until the school day ended. The constant cycle of exhaustion, self-doubt, and fear began to wear her down. She felt as though she wasn't enough. Not enough for her students, not enough for her colleagues, and certainly not enough for herself. It wasn't until one particular moment that Maya began to see things differently. One afternoon, after class, Maya was cleaning up when a young girl, Emily, approached her. Emily had always been quiet, but she had a look in her eyes that spoke volumes. She hesitated before handing Maya a folded piece of paper. Maya unfolded it, her heart sinking as she read the words written in a child's neat handwriting. "Thank you for always helping me when I don't understand. You make me feel like I can do anything." The words hit Maya like a wave. It wasn't just a thank you note, it was a reminder of why she became a teacher in the first place. Her heart ached as she realized that, despite all her struggles, she was still making a difference in the lives of her students. She was still someone they could look to, someone who was there for them when they needed it most. The following days weren't easy. Maya still had to fight her way through the haze of depression, but something had shifted. She no longer viewed teaching as a burden. She began to see it as a lifeline, a way to keep moving forward, one lesson at a time. Her students were her strength. Their progress, their smiles, and their success became the fuel she needed to keep going. Maya slowly opened up to her colleagues about her struggles. She learned that she wasn't alone, that many people, even those she admired, had been through similar battles. With their support, she found the courage to seek professional help. She began therapy and learned coping mechanisms to manage her depression, but it was the connection with her students that gave her the most strength. In time, Maya rediscovered her love for teaching. She learned that teaching wasn't just about imparting knowledge. It was about building relationships, making an impact, and finding strength in the people around her. Now, Maya stands before her class with a renewed sense of purpose. She still has difficult days, but she's learned that her worth is not defined by her struggles or her mental health. It's defined by the lives she touches and the difference she makes, no matter how small. Her story is a reminder that even when we feel broken, there is strength in the lives we touch, in the connections we make, and in the work we do. Sometimes, the very thing that feels impossible, like showing up every day, can become the source of our healing, our purpose, and our hope. This final story highlights the power of connection, purpose, and the impact we have on others, even in our darkest moments. It's about finding strength in the people around us and realizing that, even when we're struggling, we can still make a difference. As we come to the end of this journey, I want to leave you with these lessons, not from textbooks or theories, but from the raw, real stories of those who walked through the fire and made it to the other side. Strength is not about smiling through the pain. It's not about pretending everything's okay when your world is falling apart. Strength is choosing to stay another day. It's waking up even when your mind tells you to stay buried beneath the covers. It's taking that first step, even when you feel like you have no strength left. It's knowing that each small victory, no matter how insignificant it may seem, is a step forward. You are stronger than you think. If you woke up today, you've already done something extraordinary. There are days when simply existing feels like a victory. And that's okay. You don't have to be perfect. You don't have to have everything figured out. But if you woke up today, you're already stronger than your mind wants you to believe. It's okay to struggle. It's okay to not have everything together. It's okay to not be okay sometimes. But know this, you are not alone. You are not weak. You are not broken. The weight of depression may feel unbearable at times, but it doesn't define you. What defines you is your ability to get back up, to keep going, to keep fighting even when it feels like the world is pushing against you. And let me remind you of something important. Your story isn't over yet. You've only just begun to realize your strength. The darkest chapters often hold the most beautiful beginnings. There's so much more to you than this moment of struggle. There are moments of triumph waiting for you, chapters of hope, joy, and peace you haven't yet written. And though you may not see it right now, the best chapters are still unwritten. So hold on. Keep going. You are not finished yet.